Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Shanti. Shanti, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. Before we dive into the subject today, though, Shanti, tell us about yourself. Couple big questions. What do you love about content? What do you love about marketing? And let us kind of get to know your background.
Yeah, so I've always been a storyteller and a fan of storytelling. I actually have my degree in acting. So I fell into marketing a little bit by mistake. My first job out of college was with a very tiny recruiting company where I did everything except recruiting. And the company wanted to start doing content marketing and had outsourced to this agency. That just really did not do a good job with their work. And so I said, let me give this a shot. I think I can do a better job writing these articles. And I ended up taking that tiny portfolio to my next role at a company called Weedmaps. And since then, it's been about a decade doing all sorts of things in marketing, particularly on the content side. It's, I really pulled from that storytelling background, I think, because, you're telling a story with every piece of content you create, even if it's just a little bit of copy. And it's that emotional connection that really builds trust in a given brand or a given product. And so, yeah, I've had a little hop skippy trail of working at different SaaS companies, tech companies of all different sizes. Worked out of a kitchen, worked at Snap for a while, and everywhere in between. And along the way, learned how to do, even better articles in different industries. Done a lot in multimedia and digital marketing. At my current place, I run our podcast and have done a lot of podcast operational stuff in the past. And yeah, it's just been a really fun way to be creative in the corporate worlds. I don't know if I fully jumped into the theater realm at school thinking I would be an actor professionally, but it's really nice to be able to use that collaborative part to bring the emotional connection side in, and to, there's even project management elements that go into it from the theater background. But yeah, I really enjoy it. Been doing it for 10 years now, which is crazy. And excited to keep working on it. There's a lot of fun stuff involved.
Love it. Awesome. Well, appreciate the background. And I'm excited for the subject today. I'm excited for this conversation. Really, we're going to dive into the psychology of content and the readers and meeting them where they're at, and not necessarily trying to force ourselves on them and things like that. But first of all, when it comes to psychology, every time I talk to marketers, a lot of us know we need to incorporate psychology. When we're talking about psychology, Shanti, what are your thoughts? Like, how did you start thinking through, I need to focus on the psychology of the reader and figure out where they're at? How did that kind of come to be, and kind of how do you think about that?
Sure. Well, I've always been interested in psychology and neuroscience. I joke around with my fiance that if I have a second career, it might be as like a biologist working in those fields. I think it's so interesting just how the mind works. Yeah, I think, especially since my career started at a company called Weedmaps that was very uniquely positioned because it was both B2B and B2C. It was that middle marketplace. A lot of what I learned boots on ground was kind of where different groups of people are at different points in their journeys in which they might relate with a given brand. I should probably explain what Weedmaps is. Weedmaps is like Yelp for weed. If you look it up. That's a great
description. I love it.
If you need to find something in that world, Weedmaps is your go-to. Yeah, a patient, diagnosed with cancer looking for more natural relief is very different than somebody who consumes it recreationally, or a business that's trying to sell either of those products to those people. And so you really have to understand first where a reader might be before they even get to your content. I think that ties a lot into SEO as well. What drives a person to look for a particular key phrase in the first place? And really letting that inform the chain of events that'll eventually get them to the page you want them to land on really helps out in terms of, structuring content. It helps out in terms of planning what you want to talk about in the first place. And, as you get bigger too, you can really think about, what are all the different nuances and tangents and other scenarios that XYZ audience person might be in. And then you can get even more granular, more tailored, more empathetic. And really, from a brand perspective, that's what builds that trust. Being able to be of service, be helpful. And, maybe they don't convert that day. Maybe they don't convert that month. But the hope is when they really need what you can provide them, you're the top of mind because you've been that considerate, you've been that thoughtful, and you've been that helpful. So that's kind of what I've always tried to do, no matter whether the audience is, again, like a cancer patient or a huge commercial real estate REIT looking to invest in property. You always got to know what's driving them to act and then be ready for the response.
I love that. So it sounds like really you're not just thinking about their specific needs and their problems, some of the surface level things. You're trying to connect with them emotionally and really understand. And the trust, it sounds like, really comes from being on the same emotional level. So how can we really segment and go through that process to build out the emotional side of psychology into our content, especially when it's B2B or we're going for businesses? And how does that work? Because I think a lot of times in marketing, we take out the emotion.
Yeah.
How do you bring that back in a professional manner?
Yeah, I was about to say it's very industry dependent. And whether you're B2B or B2C, it's a lot easier B2C, I think. But yeah, I always think about, at the end of the day, the person reading your article or listening to your podcast episode is a person. Whether it's a CFO decision maker, whether it's an analyst decision maker, whether it's whatever, who's in charge of making the purchasing decision, they do have specific concerns. How is our company going to reach their bottom line? How are we going to grow and meet our KPIs this quarter? They do have concerns and drivers that are making them look for you. And I think, it's a little more technical when it's B2B, but at the end of the day, it's a lot more compelling to, how do I put this? This line keeps popping up in my head. Everybody loves to hear their own name, right? And I think a lot of marketers, unintentionally make the mistake where they go, we do this, we do that, we can do this for you. Whereas if you pivot it, like, you need to do this thing, like, more easily or more efficiently. Like, it's really spinning it on its head. It almost makes them think it's their idea in a way. Yeah. But it's a very unconscious thing. But if you can really think of it from the perspective of, this is the actual need that they're trying to solve, and you can feed that back to them and say, we know this is the need you're trying to solve. You're thinking about it this way, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, you can say, I or we can help with that. You've already proven it out because you've explained how they're feeling so efficiently and eloquently. So why wouldn't they choose to go with you? And yeah, it's a very subtle thing, I think, but just really putting that reader front and center and not really mentioning yourself much, whether that's in an article or a podcast or an email, for example, really does a lot of the work for you.
That's cool. I love that. it almost sounds like you figured out a way to be a good listener while being the one writing all the content at the same time,
Yeah.
which I think is really, really cool and clever. I think
That's a
great.
great way to sum it up, being a good listener
I
while
love
talking.
It's definitely a skill that a lot of people don't have. So I think that that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. And it can be developed too. You know,
Yeah.
I think with practice, it's one of those things where you almost try it and then you get really pleasantly surprised that it works. And as you become more confident in what you're saying, it's repetition, it's muscle building, then that becomes the norm and it's what people are used to. And that's what they associate your brand with as well.
Yeah, I love that. So another part of psychology is storytelling. You know, everyone, we think in stories. We teach our children in stories. It's what we relate to. We get emotional over stories, things of that nature. How can we better embed stories into our content and our brands and into our business?
So again, I think it's a little different between B2B and B2C. I will say from my B2C experience, particularly at Weedmaps, the power of one person's journey with cannabis often was very, very compelling. I can't tell you, a lot of the work I did was actually talking with, dispensary owners or doctors who the reason they entered the industry was because they had a family member or they themselves were diagnosed with something and cannabis saved their lives and made a huge difference for them. And, just hearing that story over and over and over again was a really great lesson for me as I was learning all these marketing skills and working on these projects, because that makes a case for it, right? You can see how compelling it is that they started a company because of what this meant to them. And so being able to kind of like loop that significance onto what Weedmaps did, which was make it easy to find cannabis and to benefit those who need it. I don't want to say it wrote itself, but it kind of did write itself a little bit. But it was really good practice. And then from a B2B perspective, I think this sounds bad, but every business's goal is to make money, right? So especially in the world I work in right now, which is commercial real estate, it's a very entrepreneurial industry. Every broker basically eats what they kill from a certain perspective. It's very commission based. It's very much you can be as successful as hard as you work. And from a little bit about what Crexi, my current job, does, it's the Zillow of commercial real estate. So instead of it being a house down the street, it's a store down the street or a gas station or the office building. If that's for sale or for lease, you'll probably find it on Crexi, as well as a lot of other things like research tools. And we have an auction platform, so you can sell real estate online if you wanted to. But brokers in particular, the people representing the people buying and selling and leasing these buildings, they live and die by their commission, mostly. And so being able to, from a case study perspective, interview these people, learn how they're using this tool. Honestly, a lot of the story is in what these people share with me. And then it's a matter of just reproducing it and stylizing it and getting it out to a broader audience. I think, that showing a clear example is very compelling. I mean, that's why people love reading reviews on products. They want to know what other people think and how other people are using it. And the social proof element of storytelling, like you said, we tell stories to our kids. We've evolved with them, but it's inherently a social act. You can't tell a story without having another person or hear a story without having another person. To answer your question, which was something along the lines of how do we incorporate storytelling more into our marketing? I think really rely on your current users. They're with you for a reason. They've stuck around for a reason. And they have wonderful things to share. I think, being able to explain your story can also be very compelling. I think mission-driven companies have a very, compelling edge in their corner because they have that mission and that purpose and that why behind them that they can share and energize others with. But yeah, I would say probably the most successful thing has been really finding the stories around you and giving them a platform. And you kind of associating with that story will do a lot of work for you.
Very cool. I love that. There's a lot of things I really loved about how you dive in to the real story of an individual, especially as you're talking about B2B, where people's motivations are, to make money or to progress in their career or things like that, that may not be the direct story of your business if you provide some kind of a service or software. But really, it is still their motivation. They're looking into you because it's going to make them look good and eventually get a promotion. How can you tell the full story of someone who has gone through that process and then they can put themselves in their shoes? Because it may not be that they care as much, and I'm going to go out on a very big limb here because I don't know this industry very well. But in the commercial real estate, if there's a broker wants to control their own destiny and it's all about, okay, well, let's hit certain earning goals, things like that. Really it's potentially about the lifestyle or the freedom or the things like that for that. And then the service is just a means to an end, kind of an idea for them to do that. And so telling the story of this leads to this, which leads to your freedom, which leads to happiness or whatever it may be, seems to be the real story. So I love that because I think you're going a few layers deeper than I've really ever gone before. I think that that's really compelling and smart.
Yeah. And I think, it's less of a hidden opportunity than people think. I think a lot of, especially in marketing, people do gravitate towards that, at least in conversations. And then it's just that missing piece of, well, let's just do it with that piece, right? And yeah, absolutely. It's definitely about the lifestyle and the glamour and the making money. It's hard work, that's for sure. Anyone tell you being an entrepreneur isn't hard work, as I'm sure you're familiar. But I think, it's definitely in the United States, it's the American dream, right? And there's a compelling story in that I think we culturally have been raised on. So for people of a certain ilk who want to control their destiny, and I think that's more and more people actually as younger generations get into the workspace, the idea of being able to control your destiny in an inherently chaotic world is very compelling. And I think businesses that can kind of share in that vision have a leg up in terms of their marketing.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Shanti, again, these episodes are meant to be short. They go by quickly. It's easier for people to consume on the go. I'm not going to lie, this conversation took a direction I did not expect. And I think I learned way more from this conversation than I could have ever had going any other direction. So thank you for the insights. I think that we really dove into the psychology of people and how to tell their stories and how important that is. And got a lot of thinking to do from this episode about how I tell people's stories and just how far into their story I go. Thank you so much for the time and the expertise and the advice today. It's been really, really eye-opening.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share my story. And I guess if I could leave the listeners with anything, follow your compassion, and that will lead you to where the story is. And that's probably going to be one of the best tools in your toolkit if you can follow that.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, Shanti, if anyone wants to reach out and connect with you online, how and where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Shanti Ryle, Ryle is my last name. That's probably the best place that you'll find me.
Love it. That's awesome.
I have an Instagram, but it's totally unrelated. Don't go on it much.
We'll stick to the LinkedIn then.
LinkedIn's great.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Shanti, again, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Likewise. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.